Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the official ceremony of the 76th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which took place on this day, the 19th of April, a Monday in 1943. Behind me, you can see the memorial just here by the Polin Museum of the History of Polish Jews, and you can see crowds gathering for a ceremony taking place in about 25 minutes, which is certainly going to be emotional, inspiring, and most likely quite difficult for people to watch. You are watching live on the First News channel, the premier English language source of news and information about Poland, and it is my delight and pleasure and honour, my name is Patrick Ney, to take you on this journey. We are going to be having a ringside seat in the media section. We're going to be talking to an expert from the museum here at Polin, and I'm hoping that we can also talk to people as well. You will be getting, quite literally, one of the best views in the house. So I'm going to take you there now. The ceremony will begin in about 25 minutes, and it takes place on the day of the Żonkila Akcja. This is the daffodil campaign, where people hand out daffodils around the city to commemorate the victims of the Warsaw Ghetto, and indeed those brave Polish Jewish people who fought from the 19th of April until mid-May, not for their lives, because they knew that almost certainly they were destined to die, but at least for something, for dignity, and for the chance to fight back. Now, we're going to be having a series of, I think, very moving moments today. I'm going to be speaking to an expert from the museum, but I just want to give you now a general understanding of the situation that we've got here. So I'm going to swap the camera around. If you are watching, let us know where you're watching from, and let me know please if the sound quality is okay. You can see now people are starting to gather together. We've got young people with their children. We have people from all around the world. I've seen tourists from Japan, from China, from America. Some of them are here for this particular day and this particular ceremony. Some of them are here by accident. Many of them are wearing the daffodils of the daffodil campaign. I'm going to see maybe if we can grab someone before. In about 25 minutes, just 23 minutes, we're going to be going live for the ceremony, and I'll be taking you through. We're going to hear the Kaddish, the traditional Jewish prayer for the dead, said so many times throughout those tragic years of the Second World War, said so many times on this ground, formerly the ground of the Warsaw Ghetto. Let's just remind ourselves of the facts of that ghetto. Over almost 500,000 people crammed into a space no more than 1.5 miles square, just a few kilometres square. An average of 9-10 people sleeping in every single room. Almost 100,000 people died in the course of the 2 years of the ghetto's existence. People were living on subsistence rations of just a couple of hundred calories. Now, probably none of you have ever had to do that, but I can assure you 200 calories is not enough. And over 100,000 people died of starvation and disease throughout that period. Almost 250,000, perhaps upwards of 300,000 were then taken to the murder camps of Treblinka, Belzec, Sobibor, murdered in Majdanek as well. We can see there's a lot of people, young people here. I'm going to give you a little view from the side. Let us know where you're watching from. I can see we've got viewers from Australia. If you're watching for the first time, if you're in Warsaw, do let me know as well. I'm going to see if I can find somebody to talk to. Got to try and find somebody who's an English speaker, of course, not always an easy thing. I can see children now. This is probably the children from the Łódź Children's Choir. They will be singing a traditional song from that period, and I think that's going to be an absolute highlight of this moment. No doubt they've been preparing for it for some time. Let me know if you're watching, please, and where you're watching from as well. I see dignitaries, I can see members of the Jewish community. See people from all sorts of walks of life coming here today. Now, why the 19th of April? Let's go back a little bit into the history. The ghetto started to formally come into place in early 1940. It wasn't entirely clear what was going to happen in 1939 when the Germans invaded Warsaw, but pretty quickly it became very obvious that they intended to hole up Warsaw's considerable Jewish population in a ghetto. Now, at the outbreak of the First World War, almost 300,000 Jewish people lived in Warsaw. That made Warsaw one of the biggest communities of Jewish people in the entire world. In fact, Warsaw was the second biggest Polish city Jewish city after New York. Frank's watching from Scotland. Let us know where you're watching from. If you can stay with us, the next hour or so I'm going to be with you is going to be very emotional. Thank you very much for joining us. I remind you please to share. Natalia is watching from Melbourne, Australia. I think, Natalia, you're going to win the competition for the person watching the furthest away from where we are today. But thanks to the First News, you are going to be here live and you're going to have a ringside seat. I'm going to stay here, and I think this is going to be a pretty good location to speak to. Hello, sir. Do you speak English?
Yes, a little bit.
Do you mind? I'm on the First News.
No, it's okay.
What's your name?
Polish? In Polish,
What
I
is your
have
name
Polish
in
name.
English?
Piotrek.
Piotrek. So you live
It's
here in
easier
Warsaw?
for Polish.
And do you know the story of the Warsaw Ghetto?
Yes, that's why I'm here.
And you've come specially today for this moment?
And also working around, so...
Okay, and I see you're wearing a daffodil.
Yes,
so,
yes.
why do you think this day is important now? And perhaps that's a silly question, but how do you feel looking at this ceremony and this particular day about the Warsaw Ghetto?
About this, we can know a lot about this from the internet and history books, and also because I come from China, so the Jewish people have now history in China also.
Yes.
So, and also I work in Poland.
Okay.
And lots of my colleagues, they are Jewish.
Okay, so
Yeah,
this is
Jewish.
an important day for you as well,
Yes.
even if you're
To
from
know-
China, it's
yes,
still important.
to know my history and also to know my friends.
Yes, thank
And
you very much.
also, because I'm living here, I'm working here, it's a kind of respect.
Yes, I agree with that absolutely. Well, we thank our Chinese viewers as well. And what's your name in Chinese?
Chinese?
Yes.
Bishi.
Pishi. Okay,
Yes.
that's quite easy to say, I would say. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So Pishi has come here from China to Poland, and I'm joined by Stefan Stack from the Polish Museum. Hello, Stefan.
Hi.
Stefan, I sent Stefan 5 questions to ask, and I've I've completely forgotten what they are. Tell us, what do you do here at the museum?
I'm working here in the museum as a historian. In the research department, I'm organizing academic events which accompany our permanent and our exhibitions we have at the museum, and that's it.
What are we going to see here today, Stefan? I can see the children's choir gathered up on the steps of the memorial.
Yeah, I mean, they will probably sing something for the beginning of the ceremony, and then we'll probably see a row of delegations laying down wreaths at the monument, which was created by Nathan Rappaport and was unveiled in 1948 for the 5th anniversary of the Ghetto Uprising, and since then serves as the central place for commemorating the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising.
I can see you're wearing your daffodil. That's part of the Akcja Żonkila, the daffodil campaign. Can you tell us what is the aim of the campaign?
The campaign was invented in 2013, and it refers to a tradition which introduced Marek Edelman, one of the few surviving leaders of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, because he always came on or around the anniversary to the memorial and laid down a bouquet of yellow flowers, mostly daffodils, and the idea was to find a way how the memory of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising could be passed on to a wider public, to Warsaw residents in the first place. But in the last years, it really grew much bigger, and now there are daffodils also. The campaign is also joined by in other countries.
Yes.
And throughout Poland, of course, and yesterday even many of the speakers at the European Parliament wore their daffodils during the parliamentary session.
Do you think the subject of the Warsaw Ghetto is relatively well known in sort of public consciousness, or is it a story that still needs a lot of explaining and a lot of bringing to light?
Well, I think it depends on the country and the context. I mean, in the 90s there was the phenomena that many people from abroad actually mixed the Warsaw Uprising of 1944 with the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and often, at least from Western countries, the Ghetto Uprising was much more known. I think the situation today is not like this anymore, and still I have the impression that you can never tell enough about Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And this story, especially as we still are confronted with ideas or stories telling that the Jews did not resist to the Holocaust.
Yes, I mean, it's extraordinary when you hear about what these people were prepared to do. I mean, they had no illusions that they were going to survive. This was not a battle for survival. This was a battle for some kind of dignity, I suppose, in the last moments of the deportations from the Warsaw Ghetto. What are you working on at the moment? Have you got a particular field which is related to that exact moment?
Well, I'm working very much about Holocaust memory in Poland, and also this is of course very much related to the history the story how the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was commemorated, and this is especially interesting in many different ways, and especially the role of Marek Edelman is very important here, who, as I told, was one of the surviving leaders of this uprising. He worked in Lodz as a doctor after the war, and he also joined the Solidarity movement in the 80s, and that is something quite exciting to see how he used his position to support also the democracy movement in the 80s, which was the Solidarity movement, and thanks to him, to the large part, the Solidarity in the 80s, for instance, organized its own commemorations, because they did not want to get to let the memory of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising be
extinguished.
But they didn't want it to be instrumentalized by the government, because they thought, and that is what often was heard, that and Edelman himself wrote it in an open letter, which was published in a lot of newspapers around the world, that the fight of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was not just for their life, it was for liberty and a life in dignity.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I'm going to swap back. We've been showing scenes from the ceremony. Stefan, thank you very much. I'm sure this is an emotional day for everybody who works at the museum and everybody here as well. So thank you very much for joining us and giving us a bit of perspective. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Stefan's just talked about that particular point, and I want to read something to you now which made a deep impression on me when I first saw it, which was the official communique from the Jewish Fighting Organization issued on the 23rd of April 1943, and it pertains exactly to what Stefan was just saying. I'm going to swap views so you can see people gathering around in a semicircle. We have one of the best views in the house, don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know where you're watching from. Are you watching from Australia? We've had a visitor here from China. We've got, I think now, gathering crowds, and I shall read this to you. Warsaw Ghetto, 23rd of April 1943. Poles, citizens, soldiers of freedom. Amid the sound of guns with which the German army is shelling our houses, the apartments of our mothers, children and wives. Amid the patter of machine guns that we win in battle from cowardly gendarmes and SS men. Amid the smoke of fires and the dust of the murdered Warsaw Ghetto, we, prisoners of the ghetto, send you brotherly heartfelt greetings. We know that in heartfelt grief and tears of compassion, with admiration and fear for the outcome of this struggle, you are observing the war that for many days we have been waging against the cruel occupying power. But you should know that every threshold of the ghetto will be a fortress. As it was before, so it will be in the future. That we may all die in this battle, but we will not give in. That like you, we breathe a desire for vengeance and punishment for all the crimes of our common enemy. The struggle that is going on is for our freedom and yours, for honour and for dignity. Yours and ours, human, communal, national. We will avenge the crimes of Auschwitz, Treblinka, Belzec and Majdanek. Long live the brotherhood of arms and the blood of fighting Poland. Long live freedom, death to the torturers and executioners. Long live the struggle for life and death with the occupying power. Jewish Fighting Organization. Now those are the words on the 23rd of April 1943, and one thing that always strikes me is just how much consciousness there was of the terrible crimes against humanity. The word genocide had not yet been invented, but it would be after the war, and some of those people who committed those crimes would be brought to account. But not in 1943. But that awareness was there. So now, ladies and gentlemen, I can see that some of the Polish army units, soldiers are beginning to gather. In under 10 minutes, the ceremony will begin. The soldiers are presenting arms. I'll bring that to you now. and I will be translating as much of this ceremony as I can. Thank you very much for joining us. We've got 25 people watching live, and this live stream will carry on for a little while. At 12 o'clock, the city sirens will go off. Always a chilling moment. This is something familiar to those people living in Warsaw for some time. Then, just shortly after 12 o'clock, the children's choir of the City of Łódź, who are here by the monument, will sing the hymn Zogniet Kain Mol, which means never say, or as a partisan song, and it's a Yiddish song considered one of the chief anthems of the Holocaust, and is sung by survivors and participants at memorials all around the world. Shortly afterwards, the well-known actor and director and voice coach Andrzej Ferenc will greet dignitaries and guests here as well and begin the official ceremony. We will have a series of VIPs and dignitaries laying wreaths, as Stefan has outlined, coming up here by the memorial of the victims. And then, surely what will be one of the most emotional moments, the saying of the Kaddish, the traditional Jewish prayer for the dead. And as I mentioned at the start of this ceremony, that was said many times during the course of the Warsaw Ghetto. Please let me know in the comments if you're watching right now where you're watching from. And tell me if you've learned something new from today's transmission. We're going to be going live shortly. At the end of the Kaddish, the children's choir of the City of Łódź will be here and singing Warszawo ma, the emotional words of Warszawo ma. Now I'll talk a little bit about Marek Elderman. He's a fascinating character, and I think Stefan has quite neatly expressed why he was so interesting. And what's fascinating for me was discovering that, in fact, although 19th of April is considered the outbreak of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, in fact, the Jewish fighting organisation, the Job, had been carrying out acts against the German SS and Nazis as early as January. In early January, there were deportations announced, and the German SS tried to capture up to 12,000 people and take them to the Umschlagplatz, the transit clearing camp, where they would be shipped to Treblinka to be gassed within a couple of hours. And by this stage, there were absolutely no illusions about what these people were going towards. They knew they were going towards their deaths. In fact, extraordinarily, a number of survivors of the Treblinka camp have been able to make their way back to Warsaw, where they informed people about what was happening there. So Edelman and Anielewicz, one of the other leaders of the Job, the Jewish fighting organisation, made their way into the Umschlagplatz transition clearing area and actually started shooting at the SS. And you can imagine what the surprise had been. For so long, the Jewish population in Warsaw had not fought back, and they took out their guns, which they had bought or got from the Polish Home Army, and started shooting at the SS, the supermen of the German Reich. And of course, surprise was total. Many of those people taking part in that particular campaign were killed standing, and you can now see that the children's choir of Łódź are beginning to warm up. Can you let me know in the comments if you can hear them? I want to make sure you can get the power of their voices. We can see now people coming up closer to the memorial. Let's see if I can give you a good sense of the scale of the crowd there. And in less than 5 minutes, the sirens of the city of Warsaw will begin, and we will be hearing the hymn Zogniet Kain Mol. I think the children's choir have done their warm-up, and in less than 5 minutes the ceremony will begin. I think you can see that the crowds have now grown considerably in number. The ceremony will be heart-rending. I'm not sure if we're joined today by survivors of the Warsaw Ghetto. There were, of course, so very many few. with casualty rates almost effectively near suicidal. Just a handful of people survived the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, buried in bunkers, smuggled outside into the Polish side of the city, or somehow escaping from the most inhuman conditions. Just a few square miles with over 500,000 people denied of food for years. Frank has said that the broadcast is excellent and I can hear the choir perfectly. Frank, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for watching. Wherever you are in the world, we very much appreciate it. As usual, it's traditional for my live. We can hear my voice is cracking as well. I think we're going to begin very shortly. I'll be taking you through this, translating where we are at the same time. The weather is absolutely perfect here in Warsaw. It's a crystal clear blue sky. People are gathered around, and of course you can see the daffodils, which so many of them used to mark, brought here every single year by Marek Edelman, one of the few people to survive the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which took place this day on the 19th of April 1943. It was a Monday when a couple of thousand SS units entered into the ghetto with heavy machine guns, heavy artillery, mortars, tanks, armoured personnel carriers, fighting against the Jewish fighting organisation, the Job, who were armed with Molotov cocktails, pistols, no heavy weaponry of any kind, clubs, hammers, knives, and the commandment had gone out by the Job. Those brave, very young men and women who had decided that it was better to die fighting than acquiesce. And it's those men and women that we'll be remembering today. Let me know where you're watching, please, ladies and gentlemen. The ceremony will be beginning very shortly. Say hello to Marek as well. Please let me know where you're watching in the world. In less than 2 minutes, the sirens of the city of Warsaw will begin. You can see the crowd gathering ever larger.
Proszę Państwa, za chwilę rozpoczniemy uroczystości.
And the announcement goes out that the ceremony will be beginning shortly.
Bardzo proszę wszystkich Państwa, żebyście zechcieli podejść bliżej, ale żebyście zachowali przejście tutaj po środku naprzeciwko pomnika, bo tam tą drogą będą składane wieńce. Nasze uroczystości rozpoczną się od syren warszawskich, które zabrzmią na cześć powstania.
So we've got several people watching from Australia, very much appreciate that. You are watching halfway across the world, on the other side of the world, an extraordinarily emotional ceremony which will begin in just a moment with the sirens of Warsaw going off, one of the most powerful expressions of remembrance this city can give, given also on the 1st of August to commemorate the Warsaw Uprising, which took place just over a year following. You can imagine the extraordinary sight of the Polish flag flying again above the ghetto after 4 years of occupation, marking the moment that the Jewish fighting organisation had retaken the ghetto. The battle was intense, the losses horrific. The young Jewish men and women were fighting with quite literally their bare hands against an enemy determined to use all force necessary. As a result, the Jewish fighting organisation and the Jewish civilians left in the ghetto took to bunkers, hideouts, and the German SS used the most ruthless of military tactics, fire, burning down each house block by block, flushing the residents in hiding out and executing them in the street, or shipping them to a concentration camp like Treblinka, where in total almost 900,000 Polish Jews and Jews from other countries were executed, the second highest total of any camp after Auschwitz. The concentration camps of Treblinka, Belzec and Sobibor are perhaps less well known than Auschwitz, but were created based on the perfection of the technique of murdering people at scale, at speed, that so brutally took place during the Second World War. They were quite literally death camps. A shipment of 5,000 people could be processed, as the hideous bureaucrats would have termed it, in just a couple of thousand hours. Trains from Warsaw shipping 5,000 a day throughout the course of Action Reinhardt, shipping almost 300,000 Polish Jews, and the sirens begin. I'll now remain silent for the sirens of Warsaw, marking the beginning of the ceremony. And now the children's choir of the city of Łódź will sing the hymn Zogniet kein Mol. Never say that you have reached the very
Zapraszam chór
end.
dziecięcy miasta Łodzi pod dyrekcją Waldemara Sutryka, który wykona hymn bojowników getta warszawskiego, rozpoczynający się słowami: nie mów nigdy, że idziesz ostatnią drogą.
Never say that you have reached the very end, when leaden skies a bitter future may portend. Those are the first words of this hymn. Zogniet kein Mol. Never say, or the partisan song. The children's choir of the city of
Słysz,
Łódź.
niemiecki Boże, jak modlą się Żydzi w dzikich domach, trzymając w ręku łom czy żerć. Prosimy Cię, Boże, o walkę krwawą. Prosimy o gwałtowną śmierć. Niech nasze oczy przed skonaniem nie widzą, jak się wloką szyny, ale daj dłoniom celność, Panie, aby się skrwawił mundur siny. Daj nam zobaczyć, zanim gardła zawrze ostatni głuchy jęk, w tych butnych dłoniach, w łapach z pejczem zwyczajny nasz człowieczy lęk. Z niskiej i z miłej, z Muranowa wykwita płomień z naszych luf. To wiosna nasza, to kontratak, to wino walki uderza do głów. To nasze lasy partyzanckie, zaułki dzikiej i ostrowskiej. Drżą nam na piersiach numerki blokowe, nasze medale z wojny żydowskiej. Krzyk 4 liter błyska czerwienią, jak taran bije słowo bunt. Słowami Władysława Szlęgę, poety, kronikarza getta warszawskiego, który zginął w ostatnich dniach powstania, rozpoczynamy dzisiejsze obchody.
Andrzej
Pragnę
Ferenc
serdecznie powitać wszystkich przybyłych na
now
dzisiejszą
greeting
uroczystość,
the participants
a w
of today's
szczególności
ceremony.
przedstawicieli Stowarzyszenia
with the words of a
Żydów,
poet.
kombatantów i poszkodowanych w II wojnie światowej
Greeting especially those
oraz
combatants
innych organizacji kombatanckich,
and survivors of the Warsaw
Stowarzyszenia
Ghetto.
Dzieci Holokaustu,
Let us know where you're watching from, ladies and gentlemen.
Sprawiedliwych wśród narodów świata,
Greeting those
przedstawiciela
people who
Kancelarii Prezydenta
rescued Jews during the
Rzeczypospolitej
Second World
Polskiej,
War,
przedstawiciela Kancelarii Prezesa Rady Ministrów,
representatives of
przedstawicieli
the City of
rządu,
Warsaw,
Sejmu oraz
the
Senatu,
President and Prime Minister's offices,
reprezentantów klubów parlamentarnych
the
i
Parliament,
partii politycznych, przedstawicieli władz
and the upper chamber.
centralnych i samorządowych, prezydenta miasta stołecznego
greeting
Warszawy,
dignitaries from
przedstawicieli
cities
korpusu
and regions from
dyplomatycznego,
around Poland, and indeed the members of the diplomatic
instytucji
corps,
kultury oraz przede
cultural
wszystkim
organizations,
przedstawicieli społeczności żydowskiej,
and members of
a
the
także
Jewish
mieszkańców
community
Warszawy i wszystkich,
and
którzy
people living in
dziś
Warsaw
są razem
who are
z
here
nami.
today.
Towarzystwo Społeczno-Kulturalne Żydów w Polsce od pierwszych lat powojennych dba o pamięć o bohaterach getta warszawskiego,
From the years after the
którzy
Second
jako
World War,
pierwsi
the
w
Jewish
Europie
community here in
podjęli
Poland
zbrojny zryw przeciwko
have
niemieckiemu
taken part in
okupantowi,
remembering
walcząc
the Warsaw
z bronią
Ghetto,
w ręku o godną śmierć.
especially those people who
Marek
fought in the
Edelman, jeden z
uprising.
przywódców powstania, wspominał: trzeba
Marek
było,
Edelman,
żeby
one of the
obóz to
leaders,
zrozumiał.
reminded that
Trzeba było tym wszystkim zbitym, zgnębionym ludziom powiedzieć. Trzeba było im pokazać, że przecież mimo wszystko,
Ferenc is
wbrew
reminding people that
wszystkiemu,
how important it
jesteśmy
was
jeszcze
to
zdolni do
mark
tego,
this
aby
moment.
podnieść głowę. Powstanie w getcie warszawskim to także polskie powstanie. Dała
the
temu
uprising
wyraz
was a
odezwa
Polish
żydowskiej
uprising.
organizacji bojowej, która wzywała Polaków do wspólnoty, braterstwa broni i walki o
And of
wolność.
course, the Jewish fighting organization
Przypomnijmy
also called out to the
Polacy,
Polish Home Army
obywatele,
resistance.
żołnierze wolności. Wśród huku
In
armat,
the document that I
których
read out to you
armia
earlier.
niemiecka wali do naszych domów, do mieszkań, naszych matek, żon, dzieci.
Now Mr.
Wśród
Ferenc is
terroru
reading out the
karabinów
same
maszynowych, które zdobywamy w walce na tchórzliwych
powerful statement that I
żandarmach
read to you earlier.
i SS-owcach. Wśród dymu pożarów i kurzu krwi mordowanego getta Warszawy. My, więźniowie getta, ślemy wam bratnie serdeczne pozdrowienia. Wiemy, że w serdecznym bólu i łzach współczucia, że z podziwem, trwogą o wynik tej walki przyglądacie się wojnie, jaką od wielu dni toczymy z okrutnym okupantem. Lecz widzicie także, że każdy próg getta, jak dotychczas, tak i nadal, będzie twierdzą, że może wszyscy zginiemy w walce,
Perhaps we shall all die in the
lecz nie
fight,
poddamy się,
but we will not
że dyszymy jak
surrender.
wy rządzą odwetu i kary za wszystkie zbrodnie wspólnego wroga. Toczy się walka o waszą i naszą wolność.
A fight for
Wasz
our freedom
i
and
nasz
yours,
ludzki, społeczny, narodowy honor i godność.
for our honour and our
Pomścimy
dignity,
zbrodnie Oświęcimia, Treblinek,
revenge
Pełska,
for
Majdanka.
the murder of
Niech
Auschwitz,
żyje
Belzec,
braterstwo broni
Majdanek
i
and
krwi
Sobibor.
walczącej Polski. Niech żyje wolność, śmierć katom i oprawcom.
Long live our freedom,
Niech żyje
death
walka na
to the
śmierć i
murderers and
życie
oppressors.
z okupantem.
Those are the
Dla
powerful
Żydów
words of the
obywateli
ceremony that
Rzeczypospolitej
I read
sięgających po
earlier.
broń, symbolem ich walki stały się także flagi. Biało-czerwona oraz biało-niebieska, które zawisły w kwietniu 1943 roku na Placu Muranowskim, gdzie zaciekły bój stoczył Żydowski Związek Wojskowy. Dlatego dziś wspominamy wszystkich walczących, zarówno członków żydowskiej organizacji bojowej, na czele z Mordechajem Anielewiczem, Izakiem Cukiermanem oraz Markiem Edelmanem,
Ferenc is
jak i
now reading out the
Żydowskiego
list of the
Związku Wojskowego,
leaders of the
w
Jewish
szeregach
fighting
którego
organization.
walczyli Paweł Frenkiel, Leon Rodal czy Dawid Wdowiński. Niestety nie ma już wśród nas żyjących bohaterów zrywu powstańczego. Pod koniec ubiegłego roku pożegnaliśmy
Ferenc is reminding us that there are no more
Ratajzera, pseudonim Kazik,
no more survivors from the Jewish fighting organization. The last one, Shimon
i powstania
Rotem,
warszawskiego. Cześć jego pamięci.
was the last person left, and unfortunately, sadly died last year.
W imieniu organizatorów uroczystości Towarzystwa Społeczno-Kulturalnego Żydów w Polsce oraz Muzeum Getta Warszawskiego zapraszam teraz delegację do złożenia wieńców
And now,
oraz
Mr.
oddania
Ferenc is
hołdu
inviting the
powstańcom.
dignitaries and
Najpierw
VIPs
przedstawią się
to lay
żołnierze,
wreaths of remembrance,
wtedy poproszę
the
państwa
most formal
o
moment of the
ustawienie
ceremony.
za wieńcem.
I can see various politicians opposite. but perhaps more than anything else, so many ordinary Warsawians, tourists and visitors who've come here today. And of course, as with so many of the Polish ceremonies remarking the tragedy of the Second World War, the moment of laying wreaths is a particularly emotional one. These wreaths, highly symbolic and brought in by members of the Polish army, presented to the dignitaries, who then lay them. Please let us know where you're watching, if you're watching from halfway across the world or if you're watching from Europe. Please do join in and share this episode with anyone. The dignitaries will now take the place behind their appointed wreaths, and I'm sure that the sharp drumbeat of a military drum will shortly begin as the wreaths are laid. I can see at the front of the procession some elderly looking people. They could perhaps be survivors of the uprising in the ghetto itself. Politicians and dignitaries, leaders and representatives of various organisations, former combatants, survivors, lining up. Thank you very much. Let us know where you're watching from as the laying of the wreaths for this ceremony begins. Following this, we'll have one of the most powerful moments of this ceremony, the Jewish prayer for the dead, the Kaddish. Soldiers present salute. The drums begin. The drum beat of the military tattoo as dignitaries, representatives, former combatants lay wreaths in honour of the victims and the soldiers of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which took place on the 19th of April 1943. Thank you very much for joining us. Do make sure you share this episode right now so that other people get to see this moving ceremony. See the mayor of Warsaw, members of the police force, and other dignitaries gathering to lay their wreaths. And as the final dignitaries come to lay their wreaths, there will be the saying of the Kaddish, the traditional and very powerful Jewish prayer to the dead. Representatives of the scouting movement here played such an integral role in the Polish underground and the fight against Nazi oppression. Please make sure you share this episode now so that other people get the opportunity to be a part of this moving ceremony. And you can let me know if you've shared this episode, please, in the comments as well. Wreaths start to amass by the memorial to the fighters of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Thank you very much, Kasia, for sharing, and I do encourage you all now to share this episode so that other people can see this beautiful, touching ceremony. As the final wreaths are being laid, we will shortly begin with the traditional Jewish prayer of the dead, the Kaddish. If you're just joining us live, you are at the official ceremony to mark the 76th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which took place on this day in 1943. as dignitaries and officials from various organisations, the Prime Minister's office, the President's office, lay wreaths of memory for those who on this day decided to fight back. Survivors, relatives, descendants coming together to remember the extraordinary bravery of those very young Jewish men and women. Thank you to Alex, Frank and to Kasia for sharing this episode. Very much appreciate it. Please do make sure that you share this episode on and send it on to people in your messenger so that other people get to see this extraordinary ceremony. Thank you very much to David as well. Media from different organisations from around the world here to record this moment with you. But you're the only people watching this live. Behind the imposing memorial to the Ghetto Uprising fighters, the wreaths en masse. They'll be here for days for people to come and see. I can see Mr. Piotr Stawiński, the director of the museum, State Museum of Auschwitz-Birkenau, now coming out to lay his wreath. Oh, that's not Mr. Stawiński, I apologise. As the wreaths continue to arrive from different organisations and different people representing the Polish and Jewish and international community. carried as they are by representatives of the Polish armed forces. Try and give you a slightly closer look now from a different perspective. We're going to travel through the crowd. The wreaths are numerous. I'm going to take you to the other side of proceedings. You can just see how many wreaths there are here of remembrance. Representatives of the Polish history Museum of the History of Polish Jews here as well. Thank you very much for joining us. If you're just joining us live, you are live on the First News channel. My name is Patrick Nay, and it's my pleasure and honour to take you directly to the official ceremony to mark the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which took place on the 19th of April 1943 this year. I'm going to take you to the other side of the ceremony now, passing through. You'll see the Mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski, standing there. He's already laying his wreath as well. See members of Warsaw's religious community here. See a priest. You can see there the drummers of the Polish army beating out the tattoo. Heat of the flames. See Mr. Marcin Chapliński here, so it's always a sign of a good event. Let us know where you're watching from as the ceremony laying wreaths to remember the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising continue. I'm going to take you around and see a little bit more of get a sense of the emotion of this particular moment. See many people holding daffodils, many people with the daffodil symbol on them. The number of people here is quite extraordinary. I can hear different accents, different languages in the crowd. As we heard from a gentleman from China as well, coming here. The ceremony continues, ladies and gentlemen, and shortly we'll be saying the Kaddish, the traditional Jewish prayer of remembrance. This is the final soldier from the group laying the wreaths. You can see just how many people there are here. And if you happen to be in Warsaw today, as we were talking to Stefan earlier, you may well be met by people handing out yellow daffodils, and that's part of the Akcja Żonkile, the daffodil campaign, sharing these little paper stickers really that you can get onto your shirt and just remember these victims. And I think this is a fantastic campaign. I may be taking part in it myself, and I'll be handing them out as well. So if you happen to be in Warsaw, then you can take part in that campaign. But if you aren't in Warsaw, you can still be a part by going to the Polish Museum of the History of Polish Jews, and I believe that they have a cutout daffodil that you can actually print out yourself to wear in remembrance. So you can see this crowds are fairly sizable. So I wonder if this... Excuse me, do you speak English? Where are you guys from?
Poland.
From Poland? Oh, okay. Do you mind if I just switch around and talk to you guys? What are your names? Sarah and?
Nora.
And why have you come here today?
To remember.
To remember.
Yeah.
Are you from Warsaw?
Yeah.
Okay, and do you know much about the story of the ghetto?
Yes, we do. We studied study in school.
Oh, excellent. Okay, very good. Well, Nora and
No, Sarah. And
Sarah and Nora, sorry. Thank you very much for joining us as well, and it's great to see young people coming and joining. You are live on the First News channel, which is the premier English language channel for news about culture about Poland. See, they obviously know the channel already. Oops, let's... Nora and Sarah there. Two young Polish girls who've come down here, just to remember. I think one of the interesting features of the Daffodil campaign is the sheer number of young people taking part, as of course in ceremonies to mark the 1st of August, Warsaw Uprising as well. You can see now the sheer mass of people, members of the Polish Armed Forces, dignitaries lining up, and of course the extraordinary symbols of remembrance, these beautiful, intricate wreaths being laid by representatives of organisations from Poland and beyond. Outside the Polish Museum for the History of Polish Jews, here in Warsaw, on the location of the Warsaw Ghetto. I think this is probably one of the most extraordinary views I've ever seen. And the yellow daffodil, the symbol of remembrance for the ghetto fighters, continues. See many of them around there, many of the dignitaries staying in the crowd, not quite ready yet to leave as the ceremony continues. Let me know where you're watching from, please, and if you've got any reflections, feelings and thoughts on the subject of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and indeed the Warsaw Ghetto, those 500,000 people who were crammed into such a small space period, treated more inhumanely than you can possibly imagine. If you can write now in the comments section as well, and I thank each and every one of you personally and individually for having been a part of sharing this experience around the world. We've had viewers from Australia, from the UK, from the US, and I'm grateful to every single one of you for taking the time out of your busy days to be able to share and join in this unique and moving experience. As the last of the wreaths are laid, the Kaddish, the traditional Jewish prayer for the dead, will be said. And of course there are so many stories from this uprising and from the ghetto itself that will never be known because of the sheer fact that so few survivors remained. We've said it already, but it bears repeating that the members of the Job Jewish fighting organisation were under no illusions. They knew that they would not survive that battle, and yet they fought anyway. And the powerful words read out by Andrzej Ferenc, the declaration from the Jewish fighting organisation to their Polish brothers, as they called them, I think says it all. I'm going to say hello to Kasia, to David, to Frank, to Renata as well for being a part of this transmission. The final wreaths have been laid. The saying of the Kaddish will now begin. The soldiers come to arms. and present their arms.
Zapraszam rabina Michaela Szydrika, by odmówił Kaddish.
Now, Rabbin Michael Shudrik will read the Kaddish, the Chief Rabbi of Poland. Glorified and sanctified be God's great name throughout the world.
לדברו חלתי, יחל ישל אדוני, כי אם אדוני חסד, ועדי מופדות, הוא יפתה את ישראל מכל עוונותיו. יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבו, יאמר דברך חיותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחייך בית ישראל, בעגלו בזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבו מברך לממיו, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, יתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה, ושמי לקדשה בריחו, יהיה לו מן כל ברכתה וישועתה, ושפחתה ונחמתה, גם יראה ביומה וימרומן. יהי שלום רב מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו וכל ישראל וימרומן. שלום ונאמר, ויעשה שלום, עלינו וכל ישראל, ויאמרו אמן.
Uroczystości zakończy pieśń Warszawo ma w wykonaniu chóru dziecięcego miasta Łódź.
And now, My Warsaw, the powerful song written by the popular Jewish composer who didn't survive the war, will be sung by the children's choir of the city of Łódź. The words themselves are simple and yet powerful. Oh my Warsaw, I cry for you when I see you. My Warsaw, my Warsaw. Thank you very much for joining us as we end this live transmission with the powerful words, my Warsaw, I cry when I see you, sung by the children's choir of the city of Łódź. And of course the words were written by Andrzej Włast, who composed almost 2,000 songs. It carries on. There in the ghetto there is hunger, suffering, cold, but worse than the hunger or the cold is the missing memory of my Warsaw. Thank you very much for joining us on this transmission. On the First News, please do share this now. Send it on to anyone who you think might be interested. The choir will begin shortly.
Tęsknota Warszawo ma. Przez mor przekradamy się i biegnę jak zgoniony pies. Wciąż płaczę, gdy Ciebie zobaczę, Warszawo, Warszawo ma. Tam w getcie głód i nędza i chłód, i gorsza od głodu, od chłodu tęsknota Warszawo ma. Przez mur przekradam się i biegnę jak zgoniony pies. Choć robi mnie pan władza, żandar, gestapo i SS Warszawo ma. Patrz w oku mym łza, bo nie wiem, czy jutro Cię jeszcze zobaczę, Warszawo ma. Warszawo ma. Patrz w oku mym łza, bo nie wiem, czy jutro Cię jeszcze zobaczę, Warszawo ma.
The voices of the Children's Choir of Łódź.
Warszawo ma.
A very emotional and moving
W
moment.
imieniu organizatorów bardzo dziękuję Państwu za udział w tej części uroczystości.
The official ceremony now slowly ending, and applause breaks out spontaneously from the crowd for those young children, such as stirring
Zapraszamy do
performance.
składania wieńców w innych miejscach pamięci.
And now
Łączy nas pamięć. Dziękujemy.
wreaths will be shared at other places in Warsaw, marking the Warsaw Ghetto. I can see a number of people in tears as well. It's certainly one of the most moving moments. I've had the beautiful voices of that children's choir as well. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure taking you live to the scene of the official ceremony marking the commemoration of the 76th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Please do now share this episode wherever you find it. You've been a part of something special, and if you couldn't be here, then I know that you've been here, in spirit at least, through this transmission. So I'm very grateful for your attention and for you being a part of this. This was the story of a few thousand men and women deciding to fight against an oppression which we can only imagine today, but we must certainly commemorate. Thank you to Kasia, to Frank, to the many people who've joined us on this broadcast as well. I'm now going to go and see if I can meet some of the people here as well. You see the children's choir in the background, the many, many wreaths. It's been a very emotional day indeed, and I think I can see several members of the audience behind me in tears after that stirring speech. Thank you very much. I shall see you again. Please do now share this episode. You've been live on the First News channel. Do make sure you join us for other episodes commemorating Poland's painful, traumatic but inspirational past. It really has been my pleasure and honour to help you experience this together with the crowd we've had here today. Goodbye.